Hello, everyone, and welcome on into our Thursday night college chaos stream here on Fox Sports The Gambler. I am Joe Tansey. That is Mark Henry Jr., and we've been doing this all season long, Mark. We've reached the madness. And oh, by the way, we have a lovely sponsor with us throughout March Madness. All of our NCAA bracket coverage is presented by AAA. Be ready, get AAA. Mark, can I be honest and say it's been a little bit of an underwhelming day in terms of drama outside of Duquesne in the NCAA tournament so far? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, Duquesne's definitely doing a lot of the legwork for this first day of the tournament so far, and I think it's a great story. It's one that I'm partial to because I predicted it, and I saw this one coming from a mile away, and I don't necessarily think that the story's over. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit, but they've got a tough matchup in the second round, but it's about the same spread they just dealt with, and they won outright. So I think this Duquesne's defense is for real. That was a great game. One of the, that's just a classic March Madness upset in that game. Had all the makings. They kept it close, but they were able to pull away at the end. You make your free throws, it helps you out at the end of games. But yeah, the rest of the day, incredibly underwhelming. Whole lot of blowouts.
Yeah, and so I thought this was going to be the case with the 1, 2, and 3 seeds because of all the upsets in the conference tournaments. But it's kind of stunning that Michigan State blows out Mississippi State to start the day. Look, Duquesne won by 4 points against BYU, but they were up double digits for a majority of that contest. So when you look at the 6 completed games, you have 5 double-digit wins, one by North Carolina, one by Arizona, one by Creighton. Then Illinois is a 3 seed. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3 seeds with double-digit wins, plus Michigan State. And then we got Oregon right now up 74-61 in a game that I don't think has been close since halftime. And Nevada's pulling away from Dayton up 13 points at the under 16. So my question to you is, where's the drama going to come from tonight?
I think there's a couple places it could come from. I think we could see a Kentucky, an Iowa State, a Tennessee let one of those teams hang around. In fact, it's probably likely that one of those teams do hang around and give somebody a scare at some point. Obviously you have Gonzaga McNeese, a popular 12. I think we're both riding with the Zags there, obviously. But yeah, it's interesting. Drake Washington State, obviously a pick 'em. I think we both feel pretty confident about our sides in that game. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I tend to, there's 2 games that more and more I look at it, I think it's going to be a surprising outcome in the way of a favorite kind of really putting it on an underdog and maybe not so big of a favorite. So I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying maybe we get more of the same.
I think, and this is just the way I've been kind of looking at the bracket, I think there's 2 obvious spots, and I think there's a third one that fits an obvious trend that gets the job done tonight. I'll start with Samford. Look, let's not bury the lead here. I'm all in on Samford. I have them on the money line. I have them plus 7.5 against Kansas. I've been preaching the Bucky ball all week long. Been all about the SoCon champs. And Kevin McCullough being out for Kansas is a big miss. And I think the one part of this matchup that's so key is Samford is 10 deep. Kansas, what's been one of their biggest flaws all season? Depth. And when you have that issue, Hunter Dickinson's banged up. Sure, he's going to play, but is he 100%? Probably not. Look, I'm going all in. I actually, in my bracket, have 2 13 seeds winning. One of them tonight in Samford. I at least think they make this very uncomfortable for Kansas.
I think you're exactly right that they make it uncomfortable. I think if I was taking a spread on the game, I would start to lean Samford. The more and more I think about it, I did when I was driving to, by the way, coming at you live from the parking lot of Xfinity, where I believe the Tough Cover radio show will be emanating from in about 2 weeks. So maybe doing a site visit, Joe Tansey, for the Tough Cover radio show. But no, it's been a good spot to watch the games. But on the way in, I was listening to you and Sean Brace right here, presented by AAA on the College Chaos Gambler stream, and I thought that was a great point. And honestly, there was part of me that was thinking, you know what? People are too high on Samford, and I think people are getting a little too big on it. I think it's becoming a little bit too trendy, and Vegas won't adjust the line keeping it up there at 7.5, respecting Kansas. Maybe that's a bit of a name brand thing there for the Jayhawks. But I was starting to talk myself into Kansas when you gave that altitude point. It's really what talked me out. I think that game comes down to the wire. I still think Kansas gets it done. I don't know if they have the size to deal with Dickinson if he's healthy. But I said that about Dayton and Nevada. Nevada's kind of they struggled early with Holmes, and they really made some adjustments. They made some doubles. Dayton hasn't been able to adjust. Maybe we see the same with Kansas, where they're not able to adjust if you're able to double hit Dickinson.
Yeah, that's a fascinating matchup because of just how much energy everyone has put into Samford and saying they're going to be the trendy upset pick. Let's talk about another one that I think is starting to trend a little bit, at least in my eyes. This game has completely flipped in the last 24 hours, and that's Colorado State and Texas. We always talk about the first four winner winning at least one game after the first four. So your candidates left are Grambling against Purdue, which, I mean, given Purdue's history, you never know. But likely Colorado against Florida tomorrow or Colorado State against Texas tonight. Texas, just the consistency for me is the issue. Yes, everybody's going to point to Max Asmus, March legend from his time at Oral Roberts. But the coaching and the consistency are lacking there with Texas. And that's what concerns me. And I watched Colorado State, and yes, they beat Virginia. It really wasn't much of a contest. But the way they kind of handled that game, very professionally, and I think Isaiah Stevens didn't really do too much in the point column in that game. They can match up with Texas, very well disciplined. I think I might give Nico Medved the coaching advantage. I've fallen in love more with Colorado State over the last 48 hours, and I'm going all in on them and taking them +3 and the money line.
I've kind of had the opposite. So I
good. We can't agree on everything. I love that.
Yeah, we've got you can't see it.
There we go.
I've got the Texas shirt on. Texas going into the day was actually my least confident bet. I had 8 bets to start today. I've added 2 since. By the way, both those 2 that I've added have won. Hint. But maybe I should stop, researching these plays and add them on the seat of my pants. Maybe that's what I should do. But the Texas game, I liked Texas -2, where I initially got it. That line ballooned up to 3.5, depending where you look. And I just think that Texas, they remind me a lot of Michigan State, where it's kind of a very similar team to last year. They were really inconsistent, really up and down. But guess what? The predictive metrics have never quit on Michigan State and Texas. Even more so Michigan State. Michigan State was a top 20 KenPom team. I think Texas is like 26, 27, somewhere in that range off the top of my head on KenPom. Their offense is within the top 20, I believe, as well. I just think you bring back all those ingredients from a team that made a deep run last year, a team that has the talent, has the offense that can really go off. And that's why I'm on Texas -2. I was going to double down on that, but I looked into it. I'm on Texas team total over 73.5 now. Okay. They've hit that. They've hit 74 plus in their last 5 games and in 14 of their last 18 games. Now, Colorado State, pretty good defense, 31st in KenPom defensive efficiency. So not like you're going against a bad defense, but a lot of those times we're talking about 14 of 18, they scored 74 plus. I'd say about more than half of those have been 85 plus. So Texas has this gear that they can get to offensively. Maybe they kind of struggle defensively and Isaiah Stevens goes off against them. But I think if you bet Texas -2 and you bet the Texas team total over, there's a good chance you're at least splitting, if not hitting both.
I'm really in for a guard matchup. It's the first game of the night session, 6:50 tip-off at TNT. Max Asmus versus Isaiah Stevens. Give it to me. Like I need some like drama injected into my veins. Oregon's, by the way, quick update, Oregon 78-65 with 2:45 to go. And Folly Dante.
Quack.
Exactly. It's funny. I'm watching the games with my brother-in-law, and he's on South Carolina. I gave him like an emphatic quack on my way into the stream. And Folly Dante has been playing incredible. Kuznard is having a phenomenal game as well for the Ducks. And Dana Altman is 2 minutes and 28 seconds away from facing his old team, the Creighton Blue Jays, a narrative that everybody talked up the Rick Barnes Texas versus Tennessee narrative, but that's actually the one that spurred a mid-major powerhouse in Creighton many eons ago.
I said it on the Daily Ticket, but my little brother, not a big sports fan. He follows the Phillies, everything else very casual. He picked a Final Four. I think it was UConn, UNC. There was another chalky team in there, and then he had Oregon, and he's all in on the Ducks. He's got Oregon in the Final Four. I'll tell you what, they look like it in that game so far against South Carolina. They're making Ken Pom look very smart. Ken Pom, South Carolina, a team that Ken Pom never bought into.
Right.
Whereas Oregon, maybe a team that was inconsistent throughout the year, but has really, really played well down the stretch here because of guys like Nafali Dante, Kuznard. Those guys have really stepped up down the stretch. And Oregon, Creighton is like you said, that matchup is very fun. The Dana Altman revenge matchup. I don't know if it's revenge, actually. That's probably not fair. But
at this point, it's not revenge.
Just a fun storyline. But the Dana Altman, going back and facing Creighton, I like Creighton a lot. Creighton ended up closing that out. They covered the spread, so all the Creighton backers are happy. They didn't look great in the first half. They definitely let Akron hang around a little bit. So you could point to that and say, man, if Oregon's able to escape, you said 13 points up with 2 minutes to go, if they're able to get out of that, that is a live dog there against Creighton. I wonder what that spread would be. I would probably assume like Creighton by 4.5 would be my guess.
Well, and that's for reference, the Carolina-Michigan State spread opened at 4.
Yeah, so that would be my guess, 4.5. If it's Creighton, Oregon, I'd guess a 3.5, 4-point spread, so 3.5 to 4.5, something in that range. And that's a game I wouldn't want to bet either side of, to be quite honest.
No, I think in terms of just the entire set of winners so far, when you look at the big picture, none of the top seeds looked fantastic in their first halves.
Mm-hmm.
They all pulled away in the second half and left any doubt. Wagner hung with Carolina as much as they could. Long Beach, the same for Arizona, but Arizona pulled away immediately at the start of the second half. Mm-hmm. We saw that with Illinois. By the way, Marcus Domask, I believe that they said the 10th triple-double in NCAA tournament history.
Yeah.
John Morant, the last guy to do that. And then Creighton, same thing. They dealt with Akron's pressure. They contained them. They were up 5 at halftime, and then they just blitzed them in the second half. So I wonder if we're going to go.
Do you remember who John Morant did it against?
I don't.
Marquette. I believe it was Marcus Howard and Marquette, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Marcus Howard. Remember him.
I loved Marcus Howard.
Oh, he was so awesome. What a player. So along those lines here, you have tonight a handful of teams higher seeded, Iowa State and Tennessee and Kentucky. I think you and I just have no read whatsoever on Kentucky and what they'll do against Oakland. My assumption is they'll win. I just don't know what the margin of victory is because their defense can be suspect. I'm looking at the other side, though, of the two seeds against Tennessee against St. Peter's and South Dakota State against Iowa State. I think we're going to have relatively close games when it comes to the point spread in both of these matchups. St. Peter's, by the way, a top 6 team in the NCAA tournament against the spread. It's something worth noting. I believe it's 21-10, something along those lines. They're a 22-point dog tonight against Tennessee. I'm kind of doing this, and I looked at these two games specifically with the 2 seeds, and I was like, how do I want to approach this? Do we want to lay off? What am I looking at? And then when you look at St. Peter's and their metrics, and the defensive side is top 100 just across the board defensively. They have no size. We know that. We know that but that didn't stop them from beating Purdue 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's I'm kind of doing this to fade Tennessee a little bit, to be totally honest with you. I'm not totally in love with the entire package right now. Now, look, they could come out and just destroy St. Peter's. But I think a pesky team like St. Peter's that plays a decent amount of defense can at least frustrate Tennessee. So I'm looking at that angle. And then South Dakota State, 8-game winning streak coming into this game. We know Iowa State typically doesn't blow teams out. It's gonna be a slow grind. I think South Dakota State's offense can hang a little bit. I took them at 16. I'm not they aren't my 2 most confident plays, but I'm gonna bank the metrics here and think that both of these teams can at least hang within the spread. I don't think they'll win outright, as we've seen with the 1, 2, and 3 seeds so far. 4 of them, 4 blowout wins. I believe all of them covered? The Carolina cover?
Yeah.
Carolina covered. Arizona, depending on what side you were on with Arizona, and then Creighton and Illinois both covered. So top 3 seeds, whether you want to call it 4-0, 3-1-1, I got Arizona at 20, so I pushed.
I
Or
had 19 and a
3-1.
half.
So whatever the number is, they're either 4-0 or 3-1 against the spread so far. I'm interested to see how that trend continues as well. I think you're going to see a little bit of vulnerabilities in these 2 seats tonight. Not enough to lose, but enough to make it a little bit interesting tonight.
I would lean the same way. I'm not big on playing the 116s, the 215s, the 314s. I really focus on the 4 through 8 seed matchups in terms of gambling. So I did bet on Arizona, and I think that was kind of like a test case of kind of why I hate betting these big spreads. Like it ended up falling right on the number. It's such a limited range of outcomes, really. Like you're never going to feel safe on either side, really, unless you get the upset winner. So I generally stay away from those. The Kentucky spread, that Kentucky game in general, Kentucky's the only, and maybe Tansey, you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm out of line here. Kentucky's the only team I've ever seen that I could honestly tell you they could lose in the first round or they could go on and win the tournament by like an average margin of victory of like double-digit points, and I would have no idea what's more likely.
I think there's been a few teams across the years, but no one more distinct than Kentucky.
It's so random.
Like offensively, when they're at their best, when Reed Shepherd and co are firing on all cylinders, they're one of the best teams in the country to watch from an aesthetically pleasing perspective. But there are times where, and we've seen it so many times this season, where their defense not so great. But you watch that Kentucky regular season finale against Tennessee and how they won that game, and that's how they can win the tournament. So, yeah, they are one of the more confounding teams in the bracket. I think they'll be fine against Oakland tonight. I don't think it's going to be that much of a challenge. But because the total is so high at 162.5, Kentucky's team total is super high. And I think it's worth mentioning, Oakland, they don't play fast pace, but they've played 3 teams in the Horizon League, Wright State, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Milwaukee, who are all top 51 in pace. And there's been mixed results on how they've handled those games. I think it's either 2-4 or 3-3 to the total there. So they obviously Kentucky is better athletes, but I think in a similar vein in terms of pace of game, Oakland has seen that before, and they'll be prepared to at least try and deal with it.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. They run a slow pace, Oakland. So maybe if it's one of those Villanova situations, they run a slow pace. I messed that up. They run a slow pace while also shooting a pretty high percentage of threes of their shots. So it's a little bit of the Villanova strategy of you control the amount of possessions against a team like Kentucky. And if you make your free throws and you make a high percentage of your threes, you really are, limiting the amount of possessions that they can damage you on. It's going to be hard. I mean, Kentucky, they can get out and run. They're extremely dangerous offensively. It's hard for me to ever predict what's going to happen in a Kentucky game. I think it'd be hard for me to say that I'll have a single bet on a Kentucky game in this tournament that I'll feel very confident on either way.
All right, NCAA coverage here. College Chaos on Fox Sports The Gambler, presented by AAA. Be ready, get AAA. I am Joe Tansey. That's Mark Henry Jr. Breaking down tonight's matchups. Real quick score update. Oregon up 83-71 with 55 seconds to go. So I believe the over is very, very clear in that game.
Last minute and a half, it took 15 minutes.
What else is new in an NCAA tournament game? Kuznard, 38 points today. Last player with 38-plus points in a win by a double-digit seed was Steph Curry in 2008 per the TNT broadcast. They're just showing that up there.
And that's why Oregon's dangerous, man. If they have a guard like Kuznard who can go and score like that with the big like Dante, who not only, obviously everyone's going to focus on him shooting 100% and really doing a great job at the being efficient center, dunks and layups, that being it. But he affects the game on the defensive end maybe more than the offensive end. You see there's like a couple drives a half where you see a guy go in and they realize how big Dante is and they veer out or they pass out, and it really affects the way that a team can kind of drive and kick.
Yeah, the matchup between N'Faly Dante and Ryan Kalkbrenner is going to be phenomenal on Saturday. And this is when you get into like the nitty gritty of like some really fun individual matchups, and that's going to be one of them. Also, Kuznard against Trey Alexander is going to be fantastic as well.
you could make the case for Creighton that Kalkbrenner pulling him out to have to defend him on the 3-point line might be kind of what they have to do, or maybe they have to sacrifice Kalkbrenner's interior offense a little bit, have him linger on the perimeter, and you kind of either have to leave him open or you're going to have kind of wide open cutting and wide open kind of driving lanes.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating matchup. Two other games that we haven't hit on. You and I are both on Drake tonight against Washington State. I will say Washington State, I was really high on them about 3 weeks ago. They've kind of fizzled out a little bit since then. They beat Arizona twice. Very impressive. But I think Drake is poised for a run here. I have them making the Sweet 16. Tucker DeVries, one of the best mid-major players. I guess you probably haven't heard about. I mean, he was in the tournament last year. They almost beat Miami. Like that was the thing where, you know, it's one or two possessions here or there. Could Drake be on a run last year? So it'd be fascinating to watch them tonight. I think Drake has enough firepower. I think they have the best player on the floor in DeVries to beat Washington State. And as the odds show, it's kind of just a toss-up in this 7-10 game.
They say they miss the old Drake. Girl, don't tempt me. That's my quote. But Drake's going to take care of business here. It's my favorite bet of the day. I'm going to actually put a little bit more on the money line there. I had too much on Dayton, to be honest. Got myself all flyered up for no reason. That was my best bet. Talked myself into Dayton over Drake being the best bet. We're going to double down a little bit on Drake to make it the best bet. But Drake is a team that I think you put it perfectly. I think they have by far the best player in the game with Tucker DeVries. Tucker DeVries went 1 for 13 last year against Miami in the first round of the tournament. Had the worst game he's had at Drake in the first round of the tournament. And like you said, they gave him a run, a play here, a play there, and they could have beat a Final Four team in a game where by far their best player went out and laid a stinker. They have a transfer. I think his name is Aiton Wright, who's their number 2 scorer. He averages about 13, 14 a game. He's a difference between this year's team and last year's team. And then you have a freshman in Kevin Overton, who's really stepped up, scoring in double figures. He's a difference between this year's team and last year's team. Like I said, this is a Drake team. They gave a Final Four team a run last year with their best player stinking up the joint. And I think this Drake team is better. And I think the team they're going against in Washington State is nowhere near as dynamic as that Final Four Miami team was. And I know you like Washington State, but you nod your head there. I don't think you would disagree with that. That Miami team had a special group of guards and a special group of scorers, as we see now that they were completely not the same team once those guys were gone.
Right.
So I don't think that Washington State has that juice. I think Drake, like you said, is absolutely a candidate to go on a very deep run. But for now, let's just take him for this round.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good guard match between DeVries and Miles Rice. But I think that the difference there is Rice is in his first NCAA tournament game. DeVries is not. And also that revenge angle, personal revenge. It's not nothing to do with Wazoo. But when you shoot that poorly in an NCAA tournament game, you want to show up better. I think that's what we'll get from Drake tonight. The last game, NC State. Trendy pick. It's a 5-point spread against Texas Tech. Yeah, thank you. That sums up my thoughts in the game, too. I think Texas Tech is just so tough defensively that it's really going to frustrate NC State.
I think they've got guard play that's going to overwhelm NC State. They're tough defensively. I think NC State's been reading their press clippings all week long about how good they are, about how hot they are. And I talked about it before on this show. It's an odd feud that I have. It's a one-sided feud. He doesn't know I exist. Kevin Keatts getting a 2-year extension after 4 of the last 5 years missing the tournament. Never really coming close in those 4 years. He wasn't really – it's not like you hear NC State on the bubble very often. Like, none of those 4 years that they missed were they close to getting in. And he goes on this 5-game run, not only saves his job – he was going to get fired. Saves his job. And now gets a 2-year extension and a raise on what he did. Just an ultimate job by Kevin Keatts. I think he checks out. That guy is not a very good basketball coach, in my opinion. I think I always forget the name. Grant McCasland. That's the Texas Tech coach, right? Where did he come from again?
North Texas.
North Texas, yes. He coaches.
Won an NCAA tournament game.
And how did he do it? Playing defense.
Yep.
And Texas Tech will definitely do that, and they'll definitely get out and run too on you because they've got the guards, Pop Isaac, other guys there that they can really, really score it with the guards there. I think Texas Tech runs it up. I think they win by double digits.
I think the Red Raiders are the forgotten son of the Big 12 this year.
Agreed.
I think that's something we talk so much about. Houston, rightfully so. We talked about Kansas, them being in the spotlight. Okay, Iowa State, top 10 team most of the last 8 weeks. Absolutely. Baylor, same thing. Like, we're used to talking about Baylor this time of year. But I think Texas Tech, the way they are defensive, I'm not saying they're going to go on a long run, but I think they just need a little bit more love from us when we talk about the Big 12. I think you'll see it tonight. I think they'll really frustrate NC State with their defense.
I had Texas Tech taking down Kentucky. Now, like I said earlier, nothing I say about Kentucky comes with any confidence, but I do think there's a chance Texas Tech could frustrate a Kentucky team and really kind of be the perfect antidote for what Kentucky wants to do. So not only do I like them tonight, but I think they could go on a run.
So with everything we've just said, it feels like there aren't going to be many close games tonight. What do you think in your mind ends up being the game of the night on this 8-game slate, which, by the way, Dayton trying to make a comeback down 13 now with 6 minutes to go.
Yeah, Kansas-Samford definitely sticks out. Kansas-Samford. But like I said, I think the story – I'm with you. I think, if we're talking about a close game, St. Peter's and South Dakota State, I think one of those has us with at least 10 minutes or less left in the game. One of those is within 6 points, I'll say. That's the story. One of those gives Tennessee or Iowa State a struggle, and we're like, whoa, this is interesting. What's going on
The Peacocks are doing it again.
Yeah, I think either the Peacocks or South Dakota State. I'm not betting on either of them because I think there's also a chance they could lose by 1 billion. Yeah. But I think we're more than likely to not see one of these deep seeds. It was minus 165 for a 14, 15, or 16 to win. I was surprised it was that juiced up.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense with the quality of teams. We forgot to talk about Gonzaga. So let's talk about them real quick. All right, so McNeese State, look, people have made the case for them throughout the week. I don't believe a damn thing about McNeese State. Will Wade also probably has, at least 1.5 feet out the door at this point. Whichever job he is going to take, he ain't staying there for a while. I think people don't get this right. Gonzaga's having a down year by their standards. Sure, I'll give you that. They're a 5 seed. But what I will say, too, is out of the last, 6 weeks, Gonzaga's been a top 10 team in the country with the way they've played. They've got it together. Mark Few's got all the experience in the world in the NCAA tournament. If there is one coach out there who knows exactly how to prepare for a mid-major upset opponent, it's Mark Few because he's been in that role. He's almost close to the originator of that role, or at least Gonzaga is the originator of that role from the mid-major ranks. I think Gonzaga rolls McNeese. I don't think this game is close.
Yeah, I'm staying away from this one. The way that I'm betting this game, and I put a sizable amount on it for a future. I put a sizable bet on Gonzaga plus 116 to the Sweet 16. Instead of betting whether or not they're going to cover this spread, I'm not only extremely confident that they'll at least win this game, I'm even more confident. I actually think the toughest opponent that they'll have is McNeese. I think they will have a tougher time potentially with McNeese than they will with the winner of Kansas-Samford. If Samford beats Kansas, I think that's going to be such an accomplishment for Samford. And if it's Kansas, they're an even more tired, more, shorthanded team in altitude playing against a tough team there in Gonzaga. So love Gonzaga plus 116 to the Sweet 16 for the same reasons you like them to go all the way and win the region. So yes. I gave out a list today. My buddy asked me, he was filling out his bracket this morning late. He's not a big college basketball guy. He goes, how many teams do you think can actually win it? Because he initially picked Tennessee. And I told him straight up, I don't think Tennessee can win it. I know that's controversial. And I also don't think Purdue can win it. That's a controversial take. I only gave him 8 teams. Gonzaga was on the list.
I think they can win
a national title.
I have them going to the title game against UNC in my bracket. I kind of did something different. Yeah. I sat here on Sunday and said they're making the Final Four. I still believe that. I think if they get to the second weekend, they'll have 4 or 5 days to game plan for Zach Edey. I think that's something that is an advantage for a veteran coaching staff in Gonzaga. And I think because of how everything is set up in their quadrant, I think they're cruising to the Sweet 16. I have the same bet as you. I also have them. I have Drake to the Sweet 16 and then St. Mary's and San Diego State were the Sweet 16 bets I made. I like everything about the way Gonzaga is playing right now. Sure, again, tell me they're having a down year. I'll agree with you. But in terms of how they've been playing at a larger sample size over the last 6 weeks, they're playing as well as anyone.
I also have that San Diego State Sweet 16 future. I have Duke minus 110 as a pretty big Sweet 16 future. Really like, kind of similar to Gonzaga. Love how their little quadrant broke out for Duke. So love that at minus 110. Think that's great value. They're 11.5-point favorite, and then I think they'll be a pretty big favorite next round. And then I'm holding on to an 11-1 Duquesne to the Sweet 16 tickets. And now I have Duquesne 11-1 against Illinois on Saturday. So, but going back to Gonzaga, obviously we're all talking about the Caleb Love revenge game, right? And there's a great storyline that inside college basketball fans know pretty well about the personal dynamics between the two best players on North Carolina and Arizona. That's what I'll say about it. But Nembhard transferred from Creighton to Gonzaga. That's what I have in my Elite Eight final.
Same, actually. I have the same thing.
Yeah, Gonzaga Creighton. I think that would be
the OG mid majors.
I think that'd be exactly. I think that'd be a fun matchup, and that'd be a fun storyline with Nembhard there, who's really, really, really broken out for Gonzaga, especially as of late.
Yeah, we get to do like a 20-year story arc if that happens of the history of the mid major, and it's just Gonzaga, all like Kyle Korver, Adam Morrison, Dan Dickow. You name your favorites, Dougie McBuckets, your favorite lovable Gonzaga and Creighton characters. It's just a highlight reel of them for 20 minutes. I would love that. Before we get out of here, look, Dayton's cut it to 10. I don't know if they'll win, but they're being feisty, so we'll see what happens. We'll post our night slate plays up on Twitter, and we'll be back tomorrow morning, 11 a.m., to break down the Friday morning slate, myself and Sean Brace. And myself and Mark will be back here same time, 6 o'clock tomorrow, to break down the Friday night slate. Hopefully, by the time you and I talk again, Mark, we will have a lot more interesting games to talk about, because I'm really hoping we get something going this, at least tonight, and then hopefully over the next few days. And of course, all of our NCAA bracket coverage is presented by AAA. Be ready, get AAA. For Mark Henry Jr., I am Joe Tansey. Best of luck on your plays, everyone, tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.